Ladies, what I discovered, hidden inside my own living room lamp 3 weeks ago, destroyed my faith in everyone I thought I could trust, and it's about to change how you see your own home forever. By the end of this story, you'll witness the moment I confronted the person who had been secretly recording my most private moments for months. You'll see their face when they realized I'd found their hidden surveillance system. You'll hear the conversation that revealed a web of deception so twisted, it made me question everything I thought I knew about loyalty and family. And you'll understand why some betrayals cut so deep, they change you forever. I was simply dusting my antique brass lamp, the beautiful one my daughter Jessica gave me for Christmas 2 years ago, when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. A tiny black dot, no bigger than a pinhead, nestled perfectly inside the lampshade where no dust should ever settle. At first, I thought it was just a manufacturing defect. But when I looked closer with my reading glasses, I could see the unmistakable glint of a camera lens. Someone had been watching me, in my own living room. But who? And for how long? The location of this camera was strategic positioned to capture everything. My morning coffee routine, my phone conversations with friends, my private moments reading or watching television. Every vulnerable second when I thought I was alone and safe. But here's what made my hands shake uncontrollably. I realized this lamp had been in that exact spot for 8 months. 8 months of someone recording my most personal, unguarded moments without my knowledge or consent. Who had access to my Phoenix home? Who could have planted this device without me noticing? My cleaning lady Maria comes twice a week, but she's worked for me for 5 years, surely not her. My son David has keys for emergencies, but he's been busy with his new law practice in Scottsdale. My neighbor Bob helps with maintenance, but I've trusted him for a decade. Or could it be someone else entirely? Someone who knew my schedule, my habits, my routines well enough to install sophisticated surveillance equipment? But the worst part wasn't just knowing I'd been watched, it was wondering what they'd seen. Had they recorded me during my chemotherapy recovery last spring, when I was at my most vulnerable? Did they capture my breakdown after my divorce was finalized, when I spent 3 days in my pajamas crying over old photo albums? What about those late-night phone calls to my sister about my financial struggles? Every private moment I'd lived in that room for 8 months had potentially been documented by a stranger. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. Instead of immediately calling the police, I decided to become a detective in my own home. I needed to know who was behind this violation of my privacy. And more importantly, I needed to know what they'd recorded and why. My name is Margaret Sullivan, and I'm a 8-year-old retired high school teacher who thought I'd finally found peace in my cozy Phoenix suburb after 30 years of educating teenagers and raising 2 children as a single mom. For 3 decades, I was the teacher parents trusted with their most troubled kids. I've dealt with everything from students hiding drugs in lockers to parents lying about custody arrangements. I've investigated cheating scandals, uncovered bullying schemes, and solved mysteries that stumped school administrators. My colleagues used to joke that I should have been a detective instead of an English teacher because I had an uncanny ability to read people and uncover the truth when things didn't add up. After my divorce 2 years ago, I thought I'd left all that drama behind. I bought this small but beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood where the biggest excitement was the occasional coyote sighting or Mrs. Chen's elaborate garden parties. I was finally living the peaceful retirement I'd always dreamed of, reading mystery novels, tending my herb garden, and video chatting with my grandchildren in Denver. But what I discovered in my living room shattered that sense of security completely. At 58 years old, living alone as a divorced woman, your home is supposed to be your sanctuary. It's the one place where you can let your guard down, where you can be completely yourself without judgment or fear. When someone violates that sacred space with hidden surveillance, it doesn't just invade your privacy, it steals your sense of safety and trust. I'm sharing this because I know many women my age are living alone for the first time in decades. Whether through divorce, widowhood, or simply choosing independence, We're vulnerable in ways we never expected. We're learning to trust repair workers, neighbors, cleaning services, and even our own adult children with access to our homes. But as I learned the hard way, sometimes the people closest to us are capable of the deepest betrayals. I've always been the problem solver, the one friends call when they need someone to think clearly in a crisis. But nothing prepared me for the feeling of being watched in my own home, of having my most private moments recorded without my knowledge. What happened next? My investigation into who planted that camera, and what I found on the footage revealed a conspiracy that went deeper than I ever imagined. It involved people I loved, people I trusted, and motivations so twisted they still keep me awake at night. Because sometimes the person violating your privacy isn't a stranger. Sometimes it's someone who claims to love you, and their reasons for watching you are far more disturbing than simple curiosity. The truth I uncovered changed not just how I see my family, but how I understand the people we choose to trust with our most vulnerable selves. What I did next broke every rule about tampering with evidence, but sometimes you have to get your hands dirty to uncover the truth. Instead of immediately removing the camera or calling the police, I decided to leave everything exactly as it was and start my own investigation. I'd spent 30 years watching teenagers try to deceive me. I knew how to catch someone in a lie. But this wasn't about a stolen calculator or forged permission slip. This was about someone systematically violating my privacy for months. My hands were trembling as I began examining every inch of my living room with new eyes. The afternoon sunlight streaming through my sheer curtains suddenly felt exposing rather than warm. I could hear my neighbor's lawnmower humming outside, such a normal sound that made the situation feel even more surreal. Using a magnifying glass from my jewelry box, I started inspecting every object that had been in my living room for the past 8 months. That's when I found the second camera. Hidden inside the decorative wooden bowl on my coffee table, another gift. This one from my son David last Mother's Day. The tiny device was expertly concealed, almost invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears as I realized this wasn't just a single invasion of privacy. This was a comprehensive surveillance system. Both cameras were hidden in gifts, both positioned for maximum coverage of my daily routine, both installed by someone who knew my home well enough to choose the perfect hiding spots. Someone who understood that I rarely moved these particular decorative items because they held sentimental value. Someone who knew I'd be careful with gifts from my children, dusting around them rather than disturbing them. Using my laptop, I researched these types of hidden cameras. What I learned made my blood run cold. These weren't cheap spy gadgets bought online. These were professional-grade surveillance devices that could record high-definition video and audio, store footage for months, and even stream live feeds to remote devices. Someone had invested serious money and planning into watching me. According to privacy experts, hidden camera installations in private homes have increased by 300% in the last 5 years, with family members being the perpetrators in 60% of cases. Every creak of my house settling, every shadow moving past my windows, every normal sound suddenly felt threatening. I found myself wondering how long I'd been performing for an invisible audience. Had I unconsciously changed my behavior? Had I sensed something was wrong but dismissed it as post-divorce anxiety? But the most disturbing realization was yet to come. Because as I continued searching my house, room by room, I discovered that my living room wasn't the only place I'd been secretly recorded. If you've ever felt like you were being watched in your own home, hit the like button now. You'll understand what I found next. The third camera I found was in a location so personal, so private, that I had to sit down and catch my breath when I realized what it meant. My hands were shaking as I examined my bedroom with the same methodical approach. The small digital clock on my nightstand, a practical gift from my daughter Jessica when she helped me redecorate, after the divorce seemed innocent enough. But when I tilted it toward the afternoon light filtering through my bedroom curtains, I saw it, another tiny lens, perfectly positioned to record my most private space. The room suddenly felt ice cold despite the Arizona heat. I could smell my lavender room spray, the same scent I used every night before bed, and it made me nauseous thinking about someone watching my bedtime routines, my morning struggles with chronic back pain, my private phone conversations with my therapist about rebuilding my life after divorce. The soft carpet under my bare feet felt foreign, like I was standing in a stranger's room instead of my own sanctuary. I grabbed a notebook and started documenting everything with the same thoroughness I'd used grading papers for 3 decades. The brass lamp Christmas gift from Jessica, December 2023. The wooden bowl Mother's Day gift from David, May 2024. The digital clock housewarming gift from Jessica when I moved in, August 2024. All from my children. All positioned perfectly for surveillance. All installed after my divorce was finalized. My own children had been watching me, recording my most vulnerable moments during the hardest period of my life. But why? What could they possibly hope to gain from violating their mother's privacy so completely? I raised them to be honest, ethical people. David was a successful attorney who built his career on integrity. Jessica was a social worker who dedicated her life to protecting vulnerable people. How could they do this to me? I spent hours researching the specific camera models, tracing serial numbers, checking purchase histories. These devices cost over $200 each. This wasn't an impulse decision or teenage prank. Someone had carefully planned this invasion, researched the best equipment, and executed a sophisticated surveillance operation against their own mother. But the cameras themselves weren't the worst discovery. When I connected my laptop to my home Wi-Fi network and started scanning for active devices, I found something that made my hands shake so violently I could barely type. An unknown device named Home Monitor MS, actively connected to my network. Someone wasn't just recording me, they were potentially watching me live, in real time. I sat on my bed, surrounded by evidence of my children's betrayal, and felt something inside me break. Not just my heart, my fundamental understanding of who I could trust. If your own children can systematically violate your privacy, spy on your most vulnerable moments, and lie to your face while giving you gifts designed to watch you, then who is safe? Who can you ever trust again? But I still didn't know the most devastating part. The reason why my children felt justified in turning me into a surveillance target in my own home. What I found when I finally accessed the camera footage was so much worse than being spied on. It revealed a conspiracy that had been building for over a year. After 3 sleepless nights of research, I finally figured out how to access the recorded footage. The cameras were connected to a cloud storage system that required passwords I obviously didn't have. But I'd learned a few things about technology during my teaching career, and I wasn't giving up. Using David's old laptop that he'd left in my garage after college, the one with all his saved passwords, I managed to access an account labeled Mom Safety Project. The first video file was dated 8 months ago, just 2 weeks after I'd moved into this house. I watched myself unpacking boxes, talking on the phone to my divorce attorney, crying while looking at old family photos. The camera had captured everything: my grief, my vulnerability, my private moments of rebuilding my life. But it wasn't just random surveillance. Someone had been fast-forwarding through mundane activities and flagging specific moments. Sitting at my kitchen table with my coffee growing cold, watching myself on my own laptop screen, felt like an out-of-body experience. I could hear the familiar sounds of my daily routine, my morning news program, the coffee maker gurgling, my phone conversations, but seeing it from this hidden camera's perspective made everything feel sinister and foreign. The footage showed a pattern that chilled me to the bone. Whenever I had visitors, the cameras captured everything. My conversations with the insurance adjuster about my car accident settlement, my meetings with the financial planner about investing my divorce settlement, my phone calls to my doctor about health concerns I hadn't shared with anyone. Someone hadn't just been spying on me, they'd been monitoring my financial and medical information. The video files were meticulously organized into folders: financial discussions, health updates, visitor interactions, phone conversations. This wasn't casual spying. This was professional-level intelligence gathering on my personal life. Someone had been building a comprehensive profile of my activities, my finances, my health, and my relationships. But the folder that made my heart stop was labeled Legal Consultations. Inside were dozens of video clips of me talking to my divorce attorney, discussing my settlement, planning my estate, making decisions about my will and inheritance. Every private conversation about my financial plans for my children's future had been recorded and cataloged. The evidence of planning. The timestamps revealed something even more disturbing. The cameras had been installed 3 days after I'd mentioned to both my children that I was considering changing my will to leave more money to charity and less to them. 3 days after I'd told them I wanted to travel more, maybe remarry someday, and use my settlement money for experiences rather than just leaving it to them when I died. That's when I found the folder that explained everything: Mom Competency Evidence. Inside were video clips of me that had been edited to make me look confused, forgetful, or emotionally unstable. My own children had been building a case against my mental competency. I thought they were worried about my safety. I was wrong. They were worried about their inheritance. The edited video compilation my children had created was so expertly manipulated, even I began to question my own mental state until I realized what they were really planning. The Mom Competency Evidence folder contained over 200 video clips, each carefully edited to show me at my worst moments. Clips of me crying after difficult phone calls were presented without context. Footage of me talking to myself while cooking something I'd done for 30 years was presented as evidence of confusion. Video of me searching for my reading glasses or car keys was edited to suggest memory problems. This wasn't amateur work. Someone had used professional video editing software to create a narrative that portrayed me as mentally declining, financially irresponsible, and emotionally unstable. They'd removed all context from conversations, shortened clips to eliminate explanations, and compiled everything into a presentation that would convince any court-appointed guardian that I needed supervision. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely click through the files. The Arizona morning sun streaming through my kitchen window felt harsh and exposing. I could hear children playing in the neighborhood park across the street, such normal, innocent sounds that contrasted sharply with the evidence of my children's calculated betrayal spreading across my laptop screen. But the worst discovery was yet to come. Buried in the cloud storage account was an email thread between David and Jessica that laid out their entire plan. "Mom's getting too comfortable spending her settlement money," Jessica had written. "We need documentation of her declining judgment before she wastes our inheritance on travel or remarriage." David's response was even more chilling. "The competency hearing should be straightforward with this footage. I've already identified the best guardianship attorney in Phoenix. Once we're appointed as her financial guardians, we can control her spending and preserve the estate." The emails revealed a conspiracy that had been building for over a year. It started when I'd mentioned wanting to travel to Europe, something I'd dreamed of my entire life but never could afford as a single mother and teacher. It escalated when I'd gone on a few dates with Robert, a kind widower I'd met at the library book club. And it reached a crisis point when I told them I was considering downsizing to a smaller home and donating the difference to literacy programs. According to elder law attorneys, financial guardianship abuse affects over 1.3 million older adults annually, with family members being the perpetrators in 90% of cases. I realized they'd been monitoring more than just my home. They'd been tracking my bank account activity, my credit card purchases, my medical appointments, even my social media activity. Jessica had convinced me to share my passwords for safety, and David had insisted on being added to my accounts in case of emergency. Every financial decision, every relationship, Every plan I'd made for my future had been reported back to them. But the most devastating email was the most recent one, dated just 5 days ago. David had written, "I've scheduled the competency evaluation for next Friday. The psychologist is reviewing the footage now. Mom has no idea what's coming. Next Friday." That was tomorrow. Silent moment. Margaret staring at the laptop screen, the weight of her children's betrayal crushing down on her. Ladies, what I did next required every ounce of strength I'd built during 30 years of teaching troubled teenagers and surviving a devastating divorce. I had less than 24 hours to save my freedom. I had until 10 a.m. the next morning before a court-appointed psychologist would arrive at my door with edited footage portraying me as mentally incompetent. Once that evaluation was complete, David could file for emergency guardianship, claiming I was a danger to myself and my finances. I would lose control of my home, my money, my medical decisions, and my life. But as I scrolled through more emails, I discovered the most devastating detail of all. This wasn't just about my divorce settlement. Jessica had been struggling financially since her divorce, and David's law practice was failing after losing a major client. They weren't just trying to preserve their inheritance, they desperately needed it now. They were planning to use their guardianship to force me to sell my house, liquidate my retirement accounts, and move into a nursing home so they could access my money immediately. Long pause as Margaret processes the full scope of their plan. My own children, the people I'd sacrificed everything for, worked 2 jobs to put through college, supported through their own divorces and career struggles, were planning to steal my independence, my dignity, and my life savings by convincing a court I was mentally incompetent. That's when I found the final email that changed everything. Hidden in David's sent folder was a message to Jessica from 3 months ago. "I've been researching Mom's medical history. Her cancer treatment last year included medications that can cause cognitive side effects. Between that and the divorce stress, we have a solid case for diminished capacity. The surveillance footage just provides the documentation we need." Music rises, sound effects emphasize the emotional weight. They had planned this from the moment I was diagnosed with breast cancer, while I was fighting for my life, enduring chemotherapy, and trying to rebuild after my divorce. My children were researching how to use my medical treatment against me in court. They had turned my cancer, the most frightening experience of my life, into ammunition for stealing my freedom. But there was one thing my brilliant attorney son and social worker daughter hadn't counted on. I still had 24 hours, and I was still the woman who'd spent 3 decades outsmarting teenagers, solving problems and fighting for what was right. On-screen text graphic. "Sometimes the greatest betrayal comes from the people who claim to love you most." I had 2 choices: confront them directly and risk them accelerating their timeline, or beat them at their own game using the very surveillance footage they'd created to destroy me. I chose war. I wish I could tell you I handled this revelation with the grace and dignity I'd always tried to model for my children, but the truth is, I collapsed right there at my kitchen table. The kind of sobbing that comes from your soul, where you can't catch your breath and your chest physically aches from the betrayal. I kept thinking about all the times over the past 8 months when they'd called to check on me. Jessica's concerned questions about whether I was eating well, sleeping enough, managing my medications properly, David's offers to help with my finances, his insistence on reviewing my investment decisions just to make sure I wasn't being taken advantage of. Their loving concern hadn't been love at all. It had been intelligence gathering for their legal case against me. My kitchen, which had always been the heart of my home where I'd fed my family for decades, suddenly felt like a crime scene. The afternoon shadows stretching across my tile floor looked ominous instead of peaceful. I could hear my neighbor's dog barking in their backyard, such a normal sound that made this situation feel even more surreal and devastating. But somewhere between the tears and the rage, something fundamental shifted inside me. I thought about all the students I'd taught who'd tried to manipulate me with lies and fake tears. I remembered all the times I'd told them, actions have consequences, and the truth always comes out. My own children had underestimated who they were dealing with. They saw a grieving, post-divorce, post-cancer mother who they could easily manipulate and control. They forgot I was also a woman who'd spent 30 years reading people, uncovering deceptions, and fighting for what was right. As I sat there surrounded by evidence of my children's betrayal, I realized something profound about trust and family. We assume that blood relationships come with built-in loyalty and love. We believe that the people who call us mom could never truly hurt us. But sometimes the people closest to us are capable of the deepest betrayals, especially when money and desperation are involved. I'd spent my entire adult life putting my children's needs before my own. I'd worked extra jobs to pay for their education, delayed my own dreams to support theirs, and even structured my divorce settlement with their inheritance in mind. But in that moment, I realized that my unconditional love had been taken for granted and manipulated against me. I had 18 hours to save my life from the people who'd created it. I wasn't going to waste another minute crying about their betrayal. Instead, I was going to use every skill I'd learned as a teacher, every strength I'd built as a single mother, and every lesson I'd learned from surviving cancer and divorce. Sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones who feel most entitled to control your life, your money, and your choices. The question isn't whether you can forgive them, it's whether you're strong enough to stop them. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my new home in Sedona, a cozy 2-bedroom house with a spectacular view of red rock formations that I bought with my money, in my name, with a security system that only I control. The competency evaluation never happened. The guardianship case was dismissed. And my children learned what happens when you underestimate a woman who spent her life teaching teenagers that actions have consequences. At 8 a.m. that Friday morning, an hour before the psychologist was scheduled to arrive, I called both my children and asked them to come to the house for an important family discussion. When they walked into my living room, I was sitting calmly in my chair with my laptop open, displaying their email thread on the large screen TV. "I found your cameras," I said simply. "All of them. And I found your plan." The look on their faces when they realized their surveillance had been turned against them was something I'll never forget. Jessica started crying immediately. David tried to deny everything until I played the footage of him installing the camera in my bedroom. Within an hour, I had written statements from both of them admitting to the illegal surveillance and their plan to fraudulently obtain guardianship. I used their own meticulously organized evidence, their emails, their edited videos, their surveillance timeline to file criminal charges for invasion of privacy and elder abuse. David, the attorney who thought he was so clever, had documented his own crimes in writing. I didn't send them to prison, though I could have. Instead, I used their crimes as leverage. They agreed to pay for all my legal fees, my moving expenses to Sedona, and my new home security system. More importantly, they agreed to have no contact with me until they completed family therapy and elder abuse counseling. The court-appointed psychologist who was supposed to evaluate my competency instead reviewed my evidence and declared that planning and executing such a thorough investigation demonstrated exceptional mental acuity for someone of any age. The judge who dismissed their guardianship petition told David that his own mother had outsmarted him so thoroughly it was almost embarrassing to the legal profession. But ladies, this isn't the only time someone close to me tried to manipulate my trust for their own gain. 2 weeks after I moved to Sedona, my new neighbor knocked on my door with a story about why she needed to borrow $5,000 immediately. What she didn't know was that I'd already learned to investigate everyone who gets too close too quickly. And what I discovered about her past made my children's surveillance look like child's play. Have you ever discovered someone you trusted was secretly working against you? Have you caught family members or friends in elaborate deceptions? Share your story in the comments because recognizing the warning signs might save another woman from the same betrayal. If this story opened your eyes to the possibility of hidden surveillance in your own home, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, the story of my manipulative neighbor gets even darker.